Okay,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Just make sure that your mic is.
Okay.
Can you speak again?
Can you hear me?
Much better now, but it has, yeah, it's not coming through, loud enough, the voice.
Okay, okay. I just volume up. How is it? Is it better now? Hello?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Better? Okay.
Yeah, much better now.
Okay.
The last time.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. So what time is in Tokyo now? Is it 9 o'clock?
It's 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. In the evening, of course. Huh?
Yes.
It's fascinating, this new system of communicating. Really fascinating.
Yeah. I'm still not brave enough to try breakout rooms.
Yes, we need to work on that. But I mean, the potential, I mean, to reach out, I mean, to, so many people in different time zones. It's incredible. Shall we start?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, welcome again. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to your online workshop on COVID-19 and developing countries. The topic is very timely and fascinating. So the paper I will talk about is the potential impact on the COVID-19 pandemic on the welfare of remittance-dependent households in the Philippines. And this is a joint work with my colleagues, Satoshi Shimizutani and Eiji Yamada at JICA Ogata Research Institute. So, okay. So this COVID-19 pandemic is a health and economic crisis that is causing the largest global recession in the recent human history since the World War II. Saving lives inevitably requires restrictions on economic activities, and lockdowns and isolations induce sharp contractions in output, not only in advanced countries, but also in developing economies. However, the adverse effect of the pandemic is likely to be heterogeneous across countries and within countries, depending on the pre-pandemic conditions. So with this regard, we think that the potential impact of the COVID-19 crisis would be substantial for the overseas remittance-dependent countries, because overseas labor migrants are among the most vulnerable to lose jobs during a recession in host countries. And in this paper, we explore this issue and measure the potential impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the remittances and welfare for the migrant sending and remittance receiving households in rural Philippines. And our results show that a sharp fall in remittances due to the macroeconomic shock and drop in remittances induces decline in household consumption expenditure. So this catastrophic impact of the COVID-19 crisis has begun to be realized around the world. According to the OECD's quarterly national accounts data shown on the left panel, the quarter-on-quarter growth contracted sharply in most countries. For example, a fall by almost 10% in China and by 4% in Euro area countries and so on. And the year-on-year growth projections for 2020 are also very gloomy, and most economies are projected to have a sharp decline in GDP growth. So while this big picture shows the largest economic recession in the recent history, its impact will be likely to be diverse across countries and individuals within countries. So this adverse impact of the COVID-19 crisis has large impact on the remittance-dependent countries because the crisis disproportionately affecting industries where migrant workers work. For example, the industries like food, hospitality, retail and wholesale, tourism, and transport manufacturing sectors are among the most affected sectors. And also the mobility restrictions are putting another hurdle for seasonal migrant workers who cannot travel now. So how much the loss of income of migrant workers would impact those who are dependent on the money sent by them? So up until COVID-19 crisis, the remittances inflow to low and middle income countries have been growing steadily and overturned the foreign direct investment flows in 2019, making it the largest foreign exchange earnings in these countries. The remittances are important income source for developing countries, and studies show that remittances alleviate poverty, improve nutritional outcomes, and are often associated with higher educational and health outcomes of receivers. So the drop in remittances would imply that households' ability to spend on these areas would decline. And just a month ago, the World Bank released a projection that the remittances would fall by 20% in 2020, which is the largest fall in recent history. So this fall in remittances not because the number of migrants declined, but largely due to the loss of jobs and wages of migrant workers. and host countries. And past evidence shows that migrant workers are more prone to job losses than the native-born workers. Okay. So why the Philippines? Why we need to study the Philippines? First of all, it's one of the major migrant sending and most remittance-dependent countries in the world. In dollar terms, the amount of remittances sent by overseas Filipinos were at top 4. You can see on the graph on the left. As of 2019. And globally, the stock of overseas Filipino migrants are over 10 million, which is about 10% of the total population. And about 1 million Filipinos go abroad to work every year. And their top destinations are among the countries most seriously affected by lockdowns and oil price crashes, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Hong Kong, and Singapore. According to the Commission on Filipinos Overseas, the majority of the migrants are engaged in elementary and services occupations, which are also hit hardest by the COVID-19 crisis. So to analyze the potential impact of the COVID-19 crisis, we use data collected by the Japan International Cooperation Agency on remittances and household finances in the Philippines in 2 remittance-dependent municipalities in 2016 and 2019. The 2 locations are shown on the map. The first is Dingras, located in the northern Luzon Island, and Bansalang, located in the southern island of Mindanao. And our sample size is 200 overseas migrant households and 200 non-migrant households in each municipality. And the attrition rate was about 20% in 2017. So given the fact that almost 10% of the total population is overseas migrants, we oversampled the migrant households in our sample. And our sample is representative at each municipality. And we collected data on household roster, consumption, expenditure, budget, assets, remittances behavior, savings, and loans. Okay. So now let me give some brief information about the migrant households in our study. And by construction, 50% of our sample is migrant households. And in terms of population, 11.2% are overseas migrants in 2016. And their destination countries are quite diverse, comprised of 37 countries. And among these countries, the major destinations are Saudi Arabia, the US, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan. And also the characteristics of the migrants show that they are mostly women with college education and mostly working as domestic helpers, caregivers, and factory workers. And the monthly average remittances sent by these migrant workers are approximately 8,300 pesos per month. Okay, so to analyze the potential impact of the COVID-19 crisis on remittances and household welfare, we proceed in 2 steps. First, we empirically estimate the impact of remittances on household welfare measured by household consumption expenditure, savings, and loans. And through the economic conditions in host countries. And second, we use the coefficients obtained in our estimations and predicted the impact of the COVID-19 crisis based on growth forecasts by IMF before and after the pandemic. Okay. So this is our empirical strategy. We used 2-stage least squares estimations. So in order to avoid the technicality, let me be very brief about it. So basically, we estimated the impact of remittances on household welfare with an instrumental variable constructed from the GDP values of host countries. Our dependent variables are log of average monthly household expenditure per month, average monthly household savings per month, and average monthly household loan repayment per month. So our main explanatory variable of interest is remittance. And this is a log of remittance received per capita per month. And we also include some extra household covariates, which include household size, household heads characteristics, and so on. We also use this barangay. This is a municipality fixed effect. And then we also used time or survey round fixed effect, which is this lambda. So our instrumental variable is called econ. We assume that this variable captures the macroeconomic conditions of the destination countries because it's a weighted average of GDP per capita of destination countries over migrant household members. Okay, this is the formula that we computed the econ variable. And in the next step, we did predictions for the impact of COVID. So using the coefficients estimated in step 1, we predicted the impact of COVID-19 crisis. We used 3 scenarios based on the IMF growth projections. The first one is no COVID scenario, which is the IMF's growth projection before the outbreak in October 2019. Under this projection, the global growth was forecasted to grow at 3.4% on average. And the second scenario is with COVID-1 scenario. This is an updated growth projection after the outbreak of COVID in April 2020. This scenario assumes that the pandemic fades in second half of 2020, and the global growth is forecasted at -3%. And the third scenarios with COVID-2, which is the IMF's alternative scenario, which assumes that the pandemic lasts 50% longer than with COVID-1 scenario. And global growth will decline by 6% under this scenario. So for each of these three scenarios, we again constructed the econ variable given this equation. And then we derived the predicted values for two-stage least square by plugging the hypothetical econ variables. And the difference between the with COVID scenarios and no COVID scenario gives us the potential impact of the COVID crisis. So now this table shows our estimation results. And the first stage result given in column 1 show that our instrument is valid because we have fairly high R² and are able to reject the weak IV test. So 1% increase in econ variable leads to a 4% increase in remittances. So with this instrument, we estimate the second stage equation. So these results of these second stage equations are given on columns 3, 4, 5. And so we have a positive and significant coefficients for log per capita household expenditure. And the impact on saving is positive, but that for loan is negative. But both are not statistically significant. So we will mostly focus on the impact on the per capita household expenditure. So this table shows predicted potential impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We assume that the impact is measured by the change between the with COVID scenarios and no COVID scenario. So we observe here, circled in red, the negative impact of pandemic on remittances serious, with decline of 23.2% under the with COVID-1 scenario and 32.4% under the COVID-2 scenario. And this result is quite comparable with the World Bank's forecast of 20% decline in remittances worldwide. And this drop in remittances will result in a fall in per capita household expenditure by 2.2% under with COVID-1 scenario and 3.3% under the with COVID-2 scenario. So the other two rows are insignificant, so we don't really go into details on that. Okay. So let me conclude. So the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is likely to be substantial on welfare of the remittance receiving households who are subject to macroeconomic shocks in host countries. And although significant uncertainty exists, our analysis shed light on what would happen to household welfare if the GDP of destination countries decline as per the IMF forecasts. And our results show that remittances will drop by 23 to 32%, and household spending per capita declined by 2.2 to 3.3% in 1 year period. And given the rapidly changing situations, we acknowledge the difficulty of forecasting the adverse effects of the pandemic, and we also suggest the future research should use actual data before and after pandemic. Okay, and that's it from me, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Enerelt. Thank you. This is very interesting, and the numbers are quite significant, it seems.
Yes.
Now, what we're going to do now is I'm going to try that for the first time. I haven't got any questions now coming through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute everybody. So whoever wants to ask a question, please do that. Sean, can we unmute?
I was thinking more that actually if people want to raise questions, there's a raise hand functionality.
That's even better.
So if people want to raise a question, there should be a raise hand functionality. Raise your hand, and we can unmute them so they can actually ask their own questions at this point.
Okay, that's even better. More organized.
I should be more specific when I was explaining that.
Okay, that's fine.
Whilst people are thinking, I think my question that struck me there is what should governments be doing? Is there anything governments should be doing now if they're seeing these patterns?
Okay, thank you for your question. Yes, it's difficult question. I think most of the migrants, as I said, most of the migrants are working in services sector and manufacturing sector, which are mostly affected by the lockdowns. And in normal situations, those migrants, if they lose job at destination countries, they normally go back to their home countries. But in this situation, they cannot go back to their country, and many of them are stranded in foreign country without income and so on. So probably what the governments can do now is to protect these people and I don't know, to pick them up, sending charter and so on. And because these migrants are very mostly subject to not only the economic shock, but also the subject to the infection of viruses, because they lose their homes and or they have to go out to work or so on. So.
And is there any evidence of what I might describe the reverse effect that's discussed here, but I've not seen evidence for, which is that there are sectors that are demanding migrants who can't come. So there are migrants there who have lost their jobs and not working, but there are migrants who would be coming, and as yet, agriculture in the UK seems to be the idea that people are talking about. Has that switching happened?
Yes, Yes, that's also another problem because, as I said, some of the migrants are seasonal migrants. So they move from one work to another work. For example, as you said, the agricultural workers. And now many developed countries, their lack of agricultural workers because migrants cannot go to go across borders to work in agricultural fields. And also, so as you said, agriculture is one of the sectors that needs migrant workers. And another sector that needs migrant workers is probably more skilled sectors, such as the hospitals, and they need more nurses, more caregivers, also doctors, and so on. Yeah.
And I guess related to that is the what role the international community can play. I know in the G20, I mean, there have been some discussions about providing additional resources to developing countries. So when it comes to remittances, I mean, have these, is that part of the discussion that is now taking place? And I guess one important component of remittances relates to the cost, okay, of remitting the money back to the country. And then, is the international community discussing, helping people to reduce the cost of setting resources back home? And then things like that, is it part on the agenda?
Yes, that has always been a part of the agenda. And for the Philippines, sending money to Philippines is actually one of the cheapest remittance sending corridors in the world. And during this pandemic, most of the banks or money sending agencies, they are not included in the what do you call, the essential services. So unless more digital, more digital money or digital banking is developed, migrants also face a problem to send remittances, not related to their income level, because the services are not open.
Do we know how costly it is? I mean, for remittances, so if I send $100, okay, to Philippines, how much of that is going to reach the country, or
yes.
how costly it's going to be? Do we have any evidence of that? Do we know?
Yes, we have statistics on that. I think in the Philippines, it's, for example, sending money from Singapore to Philippines, it's about 2%. The remittance fee is 2%. And for example, sending money from United Arab Emirates, one of the top destinations of Filipino migrants, is 2.6%. And yeah, the highest is maybe 3% or something. So it's quite low in the case of remittances. Yeah, but some of the countries, for example, sending money to some of the Pacific countries is very high, like from Australia to Vanuatu, or it's about like 14% or something like that. Yeah. So compared to that,
which is, I guess, quite substantial, because I mean, for developing countries, I mean, this is a big chunk of income.
yes.
I mean, for us, it might sound 2%, of $100 is nothing, but I guess for developing countries, I mean, this is a big chunk of.
Yes.
resources.
Yes. So some of the migrants, in order to avoid these remittance costs, they face, like, they ask some relatives, friends, or acquaintances to carry their money cash for them. And sometimes they face the financial fraud and so on. So it's very risky for them.
Can I interject for one moment? I had a quick question about how do you think this will impact migration in the coming years? Like, obviously, some countries have done a better job in terms of taking care of their migrants versus some others, which will be definitely something people will take into account in the future. So any predictions?
How would it?
Yeah. So like in the future, in the future, if I know that, well, for an example, UAE is not taking care of its migrant population as well, people might be deterred from going to United Arab Emirates, right? So do you think there's something like that might happen, that the structure of migration flows will change?
Yes. Yes, as you said, one of the problems that migrants are not treated well at the destination countries. There are some discriminations, and the pandemic like this will hit the migrants harder than the native-born workers. But one of the most motivations for people to migrate abroad to work is the income difference between their home country and destination countries. So it will, even after this pandemic, I think it will still be motivation for people to migrate, because it's the easiest and fastest way to earn higher income, I think.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Enerelt? No, thank you, Enerelt. That has been
Thank you very much for inviting me.
fascinating. Thank you.